Welcome back to The World Right Now. Now, we've been talking a lot about Brexit and the future of Europe in the last few days, along with the rising tensions, of course, on the Korean Peninsula and US relations with NATO. Quite a lot to take in there. Well, my next guest knows more about all of those topics than most. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the former Secretary-General of NATO and the founder of Rasmussen Global, and joins me now in the studio. So thank you very much for coming in. Let's talk about this general election in the UK to start off with, and Brexit, the spectre looming large, of course. Theresa May says that it will strengthen her hand when it comes to negotiating with Europe. You in the past have talked about an introverted Europe if the UK votes to leave. Now that the UK is indeed going to leave, what does this mean then for Europe? If we have a stronger Britain, does that mean a stronger Europe, even if they're out of the European Union?
First of all, I fully agree with the Prime Minister that her hand will now be strengthened. Okay. Probably she will get a broader, stronger majority. That will be good for the UK, but I also think it would be good for the European Union.
How so?
Yeah, because the negotiation position has been made very clear. She has outlined them in 12 points. That will now be the point of departure. She can carry out her positions very clearly, and the European Union knows exactly where she stands.
So the European Union will potentially be stronger, even if it loses Britain, which it is going to do. But Europe as a whole is going to go through quite some upheaval over the coming months. We've not only got Britain, but obviously we've got France this weekend, and then we've got Germany coming up in the autumn as well. That's a lot for one continent to take when its three major powers are all going to the polls.
Yes, and that's the clear risk that during the next couple of years you will see a more inward-looking Europe. A Europe that will not be able to play a crucial role as a global voice, side by side, the United States. So that's a real concern.
You mentioned the United States, NATO, of course, your area of expertise, having headed up the organisation. Donald Trump, the US president, has in the past said it's obsolete. He now says it's not obsolete and that NATO is doing its bit. What do you think's changed since Trump's come on board in terms of changing NATO's direction?
Well, I don't think NATO has changed direction. I think President Trump has changed his position, and in a very positive direction, in my opinion. I think two things have happened. Firstly, he has been confronted with the reality, not least a hostile Russia that does not share his vision of making America great. And secondly, he has actually appointed a reasonable security team around him. Secretary of State Tillerson, Secretary of Defense Mattis, also his new national security advisor. They have all what I would call represented the continuity in American foreign policy.
Donald Trump, though, has claimed some credit with driving a new direction for NATO. You don't see that happening then? You don't see, for example, members paying their way more?
Yeah, well, I would give him a point on that. It's clear that all NATO members have pledged to reach the 2% benchmark for investment in defense. We did that already in 2014. Mr. Trump, as a candidate, made very clear that he wants all allies to live up to their commitments. And I think he's right in claiming that money is now pouring in. We saw that last year, the European allies spent $10 billion more on defense than the previous year.
Before we came to this interview, we played an interview that Becky Anderson had done with the Turkish president. Now, he's obviously just gained some sweeping powers in a referendum there. Given Turkey's position within the Middle East, given Turkey's fight against ISIS, how does NATO work alongside Turkey going forward when you're looking at a one-man band in terms of the power in that country? Who's got it?
Yeah, there's no reason to hide our concerns regarding the political development in Turkey. But having said that, I think from a strategic point of view, we need Turkey. We need Turkey as a member of NATO. We need a dialogue with Turkey. I also think the 49% that voted no in the recent referendum would expect us to continue that critical dialogue with Turkey.
Continuing our move further east as we go across the world talking about the global problems, North Korea Now, Donald Trump has been very clear in his talks with China, at least, about how to deal with North Korea. Either you fix it or we'll go it alone. And also, Mike Pence, the vice president, U.S. vice president, has been in the area recently in Asia. And he, in an exclusive interview with Dana Bash, talked about how the U.S. might deal with North Korea. I just want to play a bit of that out, and then I'll get your reaction. Could you see a direct negotiation with North Korea and the U.S.?
I think not at this time. The policy that President Trump has articulated is to marshal the support of our allies in the region, here in Japan and South Korea, and nations around the world, and China, who have taken the position now for decades of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula.
There's a lot of rhetoric there, but what does it mean in practical terms then? No bilateral talks between the US and North Korea now, so what should they do?
I think we need two things. Firstly, China must step up its effort to put pressure on the regime in Pyongyang, as they did recently when they restricted their coal import. That's very effective. I think they could do much more. That's one thing. And secondly, we need a continued U.S. pressure, a U.S. presence in the region, whether you like it or not. We need American leadership. We need a global policeman to restore international law and order, also when it comes to North Korea.
He said he was president of the United States. He didn't want to be president of the world, but that's kind of the job you take on, I guess. And as Fogh Rasmussen, we very much appreciate you talking to us on The World right now. Thanks for coming in.